VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you and a pleasant good afternoon. Vic Eliason here, your host, with an interesting program. Let me say, of course, many of you are very web conscious. You use the internet. The term Google means you go looking for something. It's called a search engine, and we go searching for various things. Sometimes it's a phone number or the name of a company or a product, and the ability to download vital information, health information, information dealing with government and our country and news and all the other things. The process of downloading, of course, has become it's not just the downloading of words, but it includes the downloading of, could be music, it could be graphics, it could be written documentation or an editorial. All of these things are what they call intellectual property. Well, today we're going to be talking about this with James Gattuso. He is a senior research fellow at the Regulatory Policy at the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies. That's part of the Heritage Foundation. And I want to say a very special to all of you as you listen. We're going to open our phone lines a little bit later and give you a chance to call in and ask questions. But right now we say welcome to James Gattuso. And James, nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
James, starting off, there's this bill we're talking about that has really become a football that's been kicked around quite a bit. It's called SOPA. Now, this is not some kind of a biscuit at a Mexican restaurant, sopapillas, that kind of thing. It's a moniker that stands for something called Stop Online Stop Online Piracy Act. And this is very interesting. But I understand it's caused all kinds of a ruckus, and people are deeply concerned. So to start off with, tell us a little about the Heritage Foundation and the Thomas Rowe Institute, and then we're going to go right into our topic today.
Sure. The Heritage Foundation is what's known usually as a think tank. We're a research organization in Washington, D.C., and we write and speak to the public about and to government officials about public policy issues of all kinds. I specialize in economic issues having to do with federal regulation. The Rowe Institute is simply a sub-part of the Heritage Foundation, Rowe Institute being the economic policy studies. Mm-hmm. And what we do is try to develop and advocate in favor of policies that are consistent with conservative principles and free market principles and principles of limited government.
Mm-hmm. Well, and obviously, then an item like SOPA comes up. It's a bill which has really raised the hackles of a lot of people, pro and con. Tell us about it.
Well, the bill is aimed at, as the name suggests, online piracy. I do always want to say privacy, which is a different issue. But
I slept on that too.
Yeah, online piracy, and what that is the infringement of copyright to intellectual property. And as you said, intellectual property is the right to expressions of ideas, copyright, trademark, patent, things like that. Somebody
writes a song; it's copyrighted.
That's right. The song and then the performance, a recording of the performance is copyrighted. A book is copyrighted. What's really brought this issue to the forefront is the increased speed of the internet that is now allowing movies to be downloaded fairly quickly and cheaply from the internet. That has worried Hollywood, frankly. They depend upon intellectual property to protect their income, to pay for the movies that they make, and they're seeing their product being either sold by others with no compensation to them, or given away by website.
Well, just here as a radio network, just to give you a little idea, our listeners an idea, we're a Christian radio network, and we carry only Christian music. But every year we pay over $35,000 in royalties. just to play the music that is part of our work. $35,000. Now, that represents our entire network, but it's still a chunk of money. But it is then distributed to those who own the copyrights.
That's right. You know, if you make furniture, or you make grow food, or make cars, you get paid for what you've produced. If you make a song or a movie, it's only fair and right that you get paid for that as well.
Well, now, along with this supposedly going to protect people's copyrights and their intellectual property, but we understand that there's a dark side to this thing that has raised the concerns of a lot of people with good reason.
Well, that's right. Now, the problem that the bill is meant to address is that although there are methods of punishing and stopping people in the United States who are infringing on copyright, it's much more difficult to do so for foreign-based websites that are based in Europe or Tonga or Moldova or someplace. So the folks in the music and movie industry and some other industries got together and came up with the idea of SOPA, which is essentially the idea is to enlist the aid of companies that work with these pirate sites to stop them from reaching consumers, to stop consumers from getting hold of them. So first of all, what it would have done is prevent ISPs, which are your internet service providers, such as Verizon or Cox or AT&T, to require them to block the connection to these sites. Secondly, it would ban search engines. You mentioned Google, the website that's used to find items on the web. It would ban them from telling people where these sites are, from providing links.
Well, the search engine would be trashed. It would no longer work.
Well, that's it. That's exactly it. In the process of putting these requirements in, you're doing damage of search engine. You're doing damage to the internet because by requiring blocking of sites, you're interfering with the connection between the user and the person they're trying to reach, which is exactly the connection we need to preserve in order to keep the internet working and to keep it secure.
Well, now we see China. When there are expressions of ideas that the Chinese government doesn't approve of, or even expressions of religious faith, Christianity, many cases, things that would relate to that or worship online, they are actually banned. And I think, wasn't it Google in China got into a scrap over that?
Well, that's right. Google actually ended up pulling out of China because their search engine had been blocked, filtered by the Chinese government. Expressions of ideas that they don't like were blocked out, and that's the one of the most disturbing things about the SOPA proposal. It would require the same sort of blocking, the same sort of filtering that's used in China. Now the supporters say, well, it's for a different purpose. We're not blocking political ideas we don't like. We're blocking infringement of copyright, but it uses the very same technology. It's the very same idea, and certainly, I think if the U.S. had gone ahead with this content blocking plan, the Chinese would simply have said, well, you see, America does it, what's wrong with it? And it would become much more prevalent worldwide.
Well, James, some years ago, we had a situation here where we had some very controversial programs on this show. And there were some archives out there on the Internet. And I recall there were some search engines, because it was controversial. Now, it wasn't illegal. It wasn't against the law. It was not something that shouldn't, and certainly was not in any way obscene or immoral. But there was some real controversy over it. And there was one search engine that literally started blocking people. They tried to get to this site. And as a Christian network, I assure you, we weren't trying to corrupt anybody. But because it was of a controversial nature, they were blocking people trying to get through. Now, that only lasted a short while, and then it went away, and we haven't had many reports of anything like that since. But as we're looking at this now, yes, we know that online piracy is a problem. I've been at National Broadcasting Association expos, and in times past watching as people who come from the Orient would come with their little cameras, and they would see a piece of equipment that was on the floor being demonstrated, and their little cameras started going flash, 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 and within about a year or so, here came a prototype that came from another country that looked just like the ones on the air, sitting there on the floor. So piracy of ideas certainly is a point. But when you start taking the main pipeline we're a Christian network, and we believe that utilizing freedom of speech, we have the right to even share our belief in the Lord, belief in God, talking about our spiritual values. But with that liberty, there are those as well who make expressions of anything that might be diametrically 180 degrees opposed to what we might present. Now, if you block one side, you block them all, don't you?
Well, if you block one side, you potentially can block them all. It opens the way to that. It makes it possible. It makes it more acceptable in many countries, and it also makes it more likely that the system just won't work. Mm-hmm. If you put one hole in the security system, remember internet security is meant to make sure that you get the messages you want, and no one else can interfere with that. They won't send you spam. They won't send you viruses that'll crash your system. Put a little hole in that so the government can interrupt that chain. Other people are going to use it too.
Now, some have said that this legislation will give the Attorney General and the President the power to police the Internet or to sanitize web searches. Does this legislation give such power?
Not directly. What it does, and there are House and Senate versions of this that are a little bit different, but essentially what it does is allows the Attorney General to go to a court and say, this website that I've identified is dedicated to infringement, meaning that is used almost exclusively for infringement, and I want it blocked. That sounds nice and restrained and limited, but so it doesn't directly give the Attorney General the right to go by whim at what they want to block, but it opens up the door to potential abuse. The question is, what is dedicated? Who decides? What facts are used? What about the parts of the website that are completely legal, completely legitimate? What happens if you have an Attorney General that distorts the facts? What happens if you have a judge that doesn't look at it closely? You're talking about very serious issues, and the potential for abuse and the potential for mistake are very large. So it's something that largely in society we don't allow the government to do, even for the best of motives. Especially dangerous when you're talking about the Internet.
Well, when you're talking about the Internet, and we know the power of those blogs, goodness, blogs can get pretty vicious at times. And we've seen people that agree and disagree, and people attacked. Goodness, I've been attacked on the Internet by those around the country that have a vicious attitude toward Christian radio. There have been those who are saying things about you that are absolutely false and at the same time defamatory, and they hurt. But again, the liberty to do so, when you have an open pipeline, there's very little to stop that.
Well, that's right, and keeping that pipeline open is so essential to keeping that discussion going.
We're going to take a break and be right back, and we're talking to James Gattuso. We're talking about SOPA, Stop Online Piracy Act, and the dark side as well as the good side. We shall return. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Radio Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what happened to the animals after Noah's flood?
Chris, the Bible says that God told the animals to migrate and fill the earth, multiplying as they go. And this they did. For instance, recently hippopotamus fossils were found in the United Kingdom. They were found in the same deposits with reindeer, horses, hyenas, and rodents. From our studies and from hints in Scripture, we see that the Ice Age came after Noah's flood as these animals were migrating. Now, the Ice Age was not a time of intense cold. It probably had warmer winters than now, allowing a great deal more snowfall, but colder summers so that the snow didn't melt. These migrating animals were able to survive for a while, even up north. Chris, the evidence fits the back to Genesis idea of creation, followed by the flood and the Ice Age.
Thanks, Dr. John. For more information, visit us on the web at icr.org. I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
And welcome back to Crosstalk. Today we're talking about SOPA. That's kind of an interesting topic, but it's called Stop Online Piracy Act. It's also known as Senate Bill 968 or House Resolution 3261. But as we're talking about this today, our guest James is with us, James Gattuso, and we're talking about the plus and the minus sides of this bill, and there's some hazards in here that certainly need to be realized. Now, you said that this is one of the most contentious but least understood issues now before Congress. What do you mean by that, James?
Well, it's contentious because it's been the subject of an intense infighting, political fighting, between two of the largest and most important industries in the United States. Silicon Valley, the Internet computer industry has been fighting hard against it for over a year now, versus the Hollywood music and movie industry, which has been fighting hard in favor of it. Mm-hmm. And it's been a classic Washington, D.C. battle, hammer and tong, with lobbyists going after each other. But first, until about a week and a half ago, very few people outside of Washington were even aware that was going on. It just is something that was not in the news. And the issues tend to be rather obscure. It involves copyright law, which quickly gets into a morass of legal theories and arguments, and of the inner workings of network engineering for the Internet, which is a world unto itself, but very important, because if that is disturbed, the Internet will not work. So you have this heavy battle going on between the two sides, with the issues simply not being understood widely at all by the public.
Well, as we're looking at this, the issue, of course, of technology, I've been noticing something very interesting when you're talking about contact and in touch with the populace. Of course, many in the broadcast industry are well aware when we talk about EAS equipment. And EAS equipment, of course, is which we use for emergency notification of tornadoes or Amber Alerts or things of this nature. And just in the last couple of years, there's been this big move to change to a digital format, and which would allow the President of the United States at any given moment, if he so chooses, to press a button and speak over every radio and television station in the United States. Now, this is government control, even over free speech. Whether or not, and again, I'm not complaining, because if there's disaster, we certainly need to have those warnings. But different levels of government have control from the local, regional, and then into the statewide, and then the federal, because it's speech, the communications thing. And the rights to say things or the rights not to say things are going to be before us in a more complex way when we have these little things that you see everybody walking down the sidewalk. It's the wonder that people don't collide with each other as they're texting one another. Grown adults, even senior citizens, walking down the sidewalk with their little thumbs working the buttons on their texting machine. So we're a culture that is certainly steeped in communication. But now we're also looking at this issue of what is copyright material, and then the hazard of how much government control should there be. Now, last week it was revealed that China had praised the legislation. Shouldn't this send a warning to legislators in that China is notorious for its censorship of free speech and human rights violations, also their Internet piracy and going into, hacking into even government sites? So what does China have to say in regard to this kind of legislation?
Yeah, I've heard some statements of praise from China, but I've also heard what may be tongue-in-cheek criticisms of the bill, saying that the United States is engaging in censorship by moving forward with this, which is ironic. China censors more than certainly any other large, developed, economically wealthy country in the world. But by giving them the platform and a plausible reason to wag their fingers at the United States over censorship, they are ensuring their own legitimacy, mm-hmm. or advancing their own legitimacy in the eyes of the rest of the world. which is more or less a gift to the Chinese that we don't need to give them, and we'll threaten the free speech rights of billions of Chinese. It's sort of a lesson in or a waste of the moral authority that the United States has as the most free country in the world. But in a way, we're throwing it away by censoring in this one area.
Well, now we're seeing mixed support for these bills. Now we've seen some very liberal names attach or liberal people attach their names to this legislation, from the liberal Barbara Boxer to the conservative Marco Rubio. We saw recently Rubio pull his name from being a sponsor, but other conservatives have also signed. And how is it that the legislation is seeing so much mixed support?
Yeah, it really is almost unique in public policy today. We're so used to battles between conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats. Either you're for Obama or against Obama on most issues, and this one issue has really mixed things up. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think for conservatives, there's a basic fundamental question when you start out: is this a regulatory bill that overregulates the internet, or is it protection of private property rights, which is also a conservative value? So it's not immediately apparent as to which one this is, and a lot of good conservatives, I think, signed on to this bill without really looking at the full consequences, or before the full consequences had been explained. They signed on to the bill thinking that it was simply protection of private property rights, and something a good conservative would support. Now, most of the conservatives who had signed on have now withdrawn, as has Marco Rubio. I've spoken to their offices, and they now realize the problems with the bill, and it's not as it had been explained to them.
Well, apparently he's removed his name from supporting it. Now, Senator Wyden said this is a cluster bomb where you should be going in with a laser, and the collateral damage to innovation and freedom is huge. Further, he said the Hill said that it's like curing a headache with a guillotine. Do you agree with that statement or not?
I think that's a very good way of putting it. The Internet, as robust as it is in many ways, is also very delicate. First of all, it changes very quickly. What is the state of the art one day may be the obsolete technology the next. You just look at things like the iPad that weren't even dreamed of 18 months ago or 3 years ago, and are almost ubiquitous now. You don't know what the future is going to bring in terms of innovation. And I even mentioned the technical complexities. Then Congress comes in with a rule and says you shall not do X, Y, and Z. Looking at the technology that exists today, it probably prevents or forestalls technologies that we haven't even dreamed of that would have been possible.
Now, there's two bills, and they're similar in some ways. If this legislation is passed, does this raise any concerns for Internet security?
Oh, it definitely does. There for past 5 or 10 years, Internet engineers have been working on a system called DNSSEC, for domain name service security, which ensures that if you're talking to a website or someone at the other end of an Internet connection, you know who it is, you know that you'll get a clear connection, you know that they're authentic or not. What this bill does is require the government to step in and break up that connection to block you from reaching certain parties. That throws off the system. That in essence frustrates the whole purpose of Internet SEC, which is meant to ensure a clear connection. So by interrupting that connection, it makes the whole system more complex, it makes it slower, it makes it more likely people will avoid it, which reduces the security of the Internet for everyone. So this is a major concern, and Internet engineers across the political spectrum have said, whoa, wait a second, this is defeating 10 years of effort that we've engaged in.
Just late last week, many Internet sites such as Wikipedia, which is that dictionary, and Google, they held a revolt over SOPA, and they led this. You would go to their site. Wiki went down completely. Google had a black shroud as a background, and this legislation has to be voted on. When is it? Is it? It's going to be coming up soon.
Well, the good news is that the opposition so far has succeeded. The strike, as they called it, by Wikipedia and protest by Google. Google didn't actually shut down, as you mentioned, but they protested. Brought this issue to the attention of people generally in the country who had not been aware of this. Remember that this had been a back burner issue and one that was not really well known outside of Washington. Last week, it became known outside of Washington because people were going on Google and seeing the message. That came through to Congress. About 13 of the 60 or 70 some co-sponsors of the bill in the Senate dropped out. A lot more, I think 30 or more in the House dropped out. And as of Friday afternoon, both the Speaker of the House and the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate have said that they're not going to bring the bill up.
Now, what caused the slowdown? Because this thing was on a fast track, and also, do you see a need for continued vigilance?
Yes, to the second one. What caused the slowdown is, in some way, and this maybe is an optimistic view, is the system worked. There was a hearing in November that was supposed to be just something where the bill would be waved through and applauded by everyone all around. And some hard questions came up. Mm-hmm. Internet engineers started asking questions, and some congressmen asked questions of the witnesses who were supporting the bill that they could not answer. And that really got a lot of attention. And some folks on the left and the right, Heritage Foundation included, brought up these questions and said, wait a second, do we really want to look at this? Do we really want to go in this direction? Mm-hmm. And that combined with, I think the final blow was this Wikipedia strike that brought this to the broader attention of the public, and the members of Congress started getting calls and letters from emails from the public saying, don't touch my Internet.
Yeah. Phone calls make a difference, don't they?
Well, they definitely do. Yeah.
Well, we're going to open our phone lines to talk about this just after the break, which is coming up in about a minute. But I just want you to know, folks, that your phone call can make a difference. Now, oftentimes we see legislation simply come back under a different name, so we've got to stay vigilant on this as well. But the big question, of course, what can our listeners do? And I'm sure that you have some words of advice for us.
Thank you.
As we pick up the phone, by the way, you can talk to your congressman. 2 phone numbers. You've heard them many times. It's 202-224-3121 or 202-225-3121. These are phone numbers that ring at the Capitol switchboard. You can pick up the phone and call and talk to your congressman regarding what you think about this bill. When I think of Christian ministries that utilize the Internet with thousands of messages available, I think of sermon audio and some of the other programs that have accessibility. But all of a sudden we find, what happens if somebody's starting preaching a sermon on a lifestyle that claims that it's legitimate or that it should be protected, as we talk about moral issues and even the issues of abortion and homosexuality and all these other things. Is there going to be a big brother watching over to shut you off? We'll find out. We're going to take a break and be right back. Our telephone number, we're going to open our lines, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. We welcome you to call us right now, and we'll talk with James some more. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Radio Network.
Biblical faith is being undermined and criticized with increasing fervor in schools, on job sites, and in the marketplace. Are you equipped to face the onslaught of secular anti-Christian values and viewpoints? Can you state clearly why you believe in Christ and the authority of the Bible? In the book, In God We Trust, author Steve Ham from Hunters in Genesis will help you identify the influence of the secular worldview and how it attempts to compromise the Word of God. He also helps you distinguish between genuine authority and the counterfeit authority of our day. And he helps the reader realize how your commitment to God's authority will impact your church, your family, and others for Christ. To receive your copy of In God We Trust, send a donation of $16 or more to VCY America, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. To make your donation by phone, call 1-800-729-9829. Ask for the book In God We Trust. That's 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, where we're talking about the Internet. Now, some people hate it with a passion. The Internet can certainly be a cold-blooded means of communication. It can be harsh-sounding and statements flying back and forth in the blogs and things of that nature. And I see people getting downright angular with one another over subjects and discussions and things like that. But there is a legitimate purpose for the Internet. I can sit here in our studios and talk to somebody on the other side of the world with an email. But what happens if that government blocks or intercepts a message on Christianity to somebody who is in a country which is strongly Islamic, where Christianity is considered to be something that's anathema? What happens with the use of the Internet? People in China were seeking to study the Bible, and the Chinese government stepping in to filter out material that is not appreciated. What about these areas? And does this concern you as a Christian? Does it concern you as a communicator? I see thousands of church websites where messages and admonition and church family are all involved. But if this ability goes into power, I mean, we're talking about something that's going to cover the entire globe, because interaction with the Internet can certainly become a serious issue. Now, James, I know you may have some other issues you'd like to talk about here. Our phone number, again, waiting for your calls. Maybe you have some opinions on this. Are you in favor of SOPA, or are you against it? Do you feel that there's some pitfalls here? There are those that do. There are those that are deeply concerned that this is using a guillotine to cure a headache. That's an interesting analogy there, James.
It's rather graphic.
Yes.
That's right. You mentioned the effect in China and elsewhere in the world. It's not beyond imagination that there's a danger in the U.S. as well. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that long ago that our primary means of communication was broadcast radio and broadcast television, and the government explicitly controlled what you could say through what was called the Fairness Doctrine.
I remember it well.
I think this conversation we're having today would not have been allowed under the days of the Fairness Doctrine.
That's right.
Now, since that time, the government has lost a lot of its power precisely because of the Internet, because there is such an easy and inexpensive way of communicating to millions of people. There's nothing better that some people in government would like than to have a way to control the conversations that go on the Internet.
Well, we see people even during the uprisings in Egypt. We see the uprisings in various places, and people with their just a cell phone taking a picture, sending it via the Internet halfway around the world. You see tremendous ability in technical developments, but if those are struck down, and I guess I'll put it this way to our listeners. What does freedom of speech mean to you? Are you willing to sacrifice it simply because of some bias within a government agency? What does freedom of speech mean to you? Freedom to say something? Or is it politically correct speech that will become the final issue here? Will it be those that come along and say, look, you didn't say this right, or you politically correct, you can't talk about that issue on the air? And there you see it. What are some of the other things that you'd like to share with us today there, James?
Well, there's also the aspect of how people communicate with their government. You mentioned this Wikipedia strike. And when you think about it, this was really a unique experience for lawmakers. They're used to lobbyists coming up to visit them and campaign contributions, and maybe having employees of big businesses come in and send them letters and emails. But here was an industry that they were proposing to regulate that simply sat down and said, "We're going to have our users be aware of this and tell you to stop." And the message got through, and the millions of people, tens of millions of people, really, that rely on the Internet got the message and learned about something that was, in previous years, would have been an inside Washington brokered deal. And it really, I think, represents a new phase in lobbying for Washington. The power of the Internet really trumped the power of the paid lobbyists. And I'm not even saying that I agree with the Internet over the paid lobbyists. Sometimes paid lobbyists are correct, but this really shows that communication with lawmakers is much more available, and the individual is much more able to influence what goes on in Washington than they were before the Internet.
We've watched the Internet being used to promote various causes. I know here in Wisconsin there have been the Internet being used to bring efforts to literally take our governor out of the seat of authority by virtue of the Internet and tweeting and sending information around the country, bringing in people even over state lines to somehow put their name on a piece of paper or to stand there representing human interest, ultimately because somebody tweeted them and suddenly they became informed and were there. When I see what happened when Mr. Obama ran for office, how many people were hooked up to the social networking that literally shot him into a place of power.
That's right, and I think even 5 years ago, the Internet grassroots, as you might call it, was fairly limited, and a lot of tech-oriented people were involved, but the average person didn't think of the Internet as a primary means of communication. Now you have a mass market. The average person, people who have no idea how the Internet works or how the machine is constructed, what's inside of the thing on their desk, which probably includes me, but people who rely on it every day. And this opposition to these bills showed that. It wasn't just the techie grassroots. It wasn't just the left of center grassroots. It was the left of center, the right of center, the middle grassroots. Average users of 360 degrees of the spectrum coming out and saying, no, don't touch this.
Well, James, let's go worst case scenario. Let's say this thing goes through, meaning that we are now going to be censored, everything we say on the Internet. And, of course, even this broadcast, as we speak right now, there are people listening to us all over the country on the Internet, simply clicking on our website, clicking on Listen Live, and the digits are flowing, and they're listening here over the Internet. When we think of the good things that are available on the Internet, but let's say that this restriction comes in. What are some of the worst things that could happen?
Well, it depends how far in the future you want to look, and to be frank, no one's saying that we're going to have a Chinese-style of censorship regime in the U.S. No one is advocating for that now. But you would have potentially a gradual, gradually decreasing sphere of things that you can say that. I bet you anything that if you have this restriction, that there will be others on provocative speech, on speech that is considered too radical, on dangerous speech, which would soon become limits on politically correct speech. I don't know how far it would go, but I think every diminishment of your speech rights is a harm, and I could easily see it going as far as many people certainly would like to see a return to the fairness doctrine for the Internet, which would be catastrophic for debate in the United States.
Well, folks, this is something that's going to affect you, and you, and you. And it's going to affect many ministries that have an Internet presence on the air. The messages that go out, the people that are aware of this. I've had, just in recent days, Internet messages have come from listeners that said, you saved my life. I was listening, and I was at a place of despair. We had one lady call during our telethon. She said, I was so despondent. She said I had taken and put a rifle to my forehead, ready to pull the trigger, and was listening to the radio, and she found a message of hope and thanked us for keeping her alive. Now, when we think about the Internet, and you can listen on the Internet, you can, of course, tell others about the programming on the Internet, just talking about our programming. But as we see our liberties taken from us, are we going to sit here, like so many, and shrug our shoulders in apathy, say, well, it just doesn't concern me, it sounds too technical to me, don't want to mess with it, everything will go on as usual? That philosophy, that everything will go on as usual, needs some real reconsideration by people who haven't bothered to vote, who haven't bothered to consider the issues, simply sitting there enjoying the moment, but not looking toward the future. And folks, I'd like to find out what you think about this thing. Folks, what do you think should be done in Washington over this bill? Now, it's complex because it affects people on both sides of the aisle. But as you've heard, the explanation here, James Gattuso has shared this important item with. And there is, of course, the H.R. 3261. It's known as SOPA, Stop Online Piracy Act. And there's a Senate version called S968. It's known as PIPA, or the Protect IPA Act. Now, both of which impact the postings on the Internet. And may I suggest that there ought to be some people concerned. Now, folks, our phone number, if you'd like to join us today in conversation, our phone number is 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Now, James, you have publications that are available to people online?
That's right. You can simply just go to heritage.org and look under either regulation or under my name, or simply, since search engines are still free in the United States, we have a search engine on the site. So just type in SOPA or PIPA, and the materials will come up.
Well, folks, that phone number again is 800-733-9829. And would you miss it, folks, if your Internet was shut down, or if it was restricted to the place where, if you mentioned, say, Christianity, let's say the atheistic doctrines have stepped in, and I mean, we've seen it already. If you're in the public school and you mention God, aside from cursing, you can cuss like mad, and you can take God's name in vain or use all kinds of vulgar language, and no problem at all. But don't you dare come on the campus and mention in a reverential way the name of Jesus, and you're breaking the law. You're worthy of being put to the house, put you right in the jailhouse. If you use the name God in a high school graduation, we just heard about this, that the ACLU and some of the other agencies and the judge himself threatened that he was going to place the principal of the school that might allow some reverential treatment of the name of Jesus, that he would be put in jail. Something's wrong somewhere. We're going to go to Illinois right now and talk with John. And John, you're on the air with our guest today, James Gattuso.
Yes, this would appear to me to be the camel's nose in the tent that would be leading to a Hitler-like takeover of the United States, because we have been completely ignorant in America. I've heard people say American people are pretty smart.
Stay with us, John. Stay right there, John, and we're going to come right back to you.
Okay.
Okay, stay with us. This is Crosstalk. We're going to take a break right now. 1 minute, we'll be right back.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewweekend.com. Have people like Bill Bright, Chuck Colson, and even Billy Graham helped to bring the religious Trojan horse into the camp of evangelicalism? All three of these men have received the Templeton Prize. Billy Graham in 82, Colson in 93, and Bright in 96. John Templeton was a man who was into spirituality, New Age teachings. He said that we need the next stage of, quote, human divine progress on the evolutionary scale. He went on to talk about the need to develop, quote, a body of knowledge about God that does not rely on ancient revelations or scripture, end quote. Why would any Christian leader accept the prize and the money that goes with the Templeton Foundation's movement and goals? It is very striking. Indeed, I believe it's possible that some of the men that have been upheld as some of the greatest leaders of evangelicalism have in fact helped to introduce the religious Trojan horse inside the camp of evangelicalism. Jude 3, 2 Peter, and Acts 20 warn of this. For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House.
And welcome back to Crosstalk as we're coming down the home stretch here with the last 8 minutes. And John is standing by in Illinois. And John, we're back on with you. Go ahead and finish. Hello, John. John, you still there? Okay. Apparently we lost John, and sorry about that. We're going to go right now to Minnesota to talk with Edward. Edward, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm calling from Minnesota, and I'm very concerned. I'm an 80-year-old veteran, and the evil empire has us down to about 2 or 3 different areas that they want to control. They control everything else, the liberal news media, and we have the Internet is the only free way of communicating with our friends, getting the truth out. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we're going right down the same road as Hitler did and Mussolini and some of those other countries where they took all our rights away. Mm. If they take our guns away, get control of our guns, if they get control over the Internet and get care of our care, medical care, mm-hmm. That's the 3 areas they got us hung. We have lost America. So we dare not let them get control of these 3 areas. Otherwise, we're doomed. We're done.
Edward, thank you so much from Minnesota. We appreciate the comments. We're going to go to Mobile, Alabama, and talk with Hannah. We have a phone number here, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Here's Hannah. Hannah, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. What would you like to share?
Yeah, I know that I was born in 94, but talking about freedom, and even now with Obama being in office, how our freedom's being taken away from us. When you get somebody in office that, you know, we can't say what the scriptures say, and they're trying to censor it, mm-hmm. What kind of people do we have in government that are trying to take our freedom away? Even the men who lost their lives so that we can have this freedom. Mm-hmm. I wonder honestly, if they were alive today, what would they think about this? I mean, and it's horrible. God's not pleased with this country. It's pitiful when our freedom's being taken away. Even so, come Lord Jesus.
You sound like a younger person. How old are you?
I'm 17.
17. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Hannah, for sharing that with us today.
You're welcome.
God bless you. Mobile, Alabama. Yeah, we better wake up. And a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to coast along because everything's going to turn out right. Folks, we're in a republic. This is a place where every one of us has a responsibility that is God-given to be a custodian of our governmental care. I mean, we place people in office, and we take people out of office that are wicked or incapable of sustaining the responsibility they've been endowed with. And, folks, the question is, do you care? This issue of SOPA is something that is very, very serious. One more tentacle, one more thing to take away our liberties. Well, we have about 4 minutes remaining, James, and I'm going to give you that and let you kind of put the capstone on as you can share again where people can get literature and share what your thoughts are. As if you were controlling this thing, what would you do, James?
You know, I think you enforce the law against stealing intellectual property. You protect that property, but you don't do that by taking away the rights of others. And I think your callers had it just right that once you start giving away liberties and ceding it over to the government, then you're on a road that leads to very bad things. It's also interesting that, or I think encouraging, that conservatives as well as liberals are in this last week defended that. And it was both left and right that said, no, government, you stay out of our business. But we've got to continue that push. These proposals may come back in Congress. I just urge all your listeners to stay engaged on it. It's very heartening that these proposals for now looks like they're stopped, but you never know when these things will come back.
Well, may I say this, folks, that it's important we stay well read in finding what is going on. I try to listen to the major news sources every day to some degree so that I can know what's going on in my world. And I can pray about the needs, and I can take steps, if need be, courageous steps in voting for something or voting against something. There's a need for people to come out of their nest and say, hey, I'm going to stand up and function today as a responsible Christian, as one who sees his government, sees the liberties that we have been given, and recognize the importance of protecting them and watching for those who would usurp that authority and would take control of the ability to literally manipulate our state, our country. And so, again, give us a web page where people can get information about your organization.
Heritage.org is the place to go. And when you get there, it'll be easy to find your way around. You can look for materials on SOPA simply by typing that into the search engine, or information about our foundation as a whole.
Now, it's the heritagefoundation.com or .org?
Just heritage.org.
Heritage.org.
That's all you need to know.
Heritage.org. And, folks, there's a website there. You can find lots of information, and I hope that you will. Well, thank you so much, James. Appreciate your making us aware of this. And should people be calling their congressman?
It's always a good idea to keep your congressman informed of what you believe they do respond to calls from the people they represent. For
just now, SOPA has been kind of struck down, right?
Right now, it's stopped, and they're thinking of how they can take another run at this. So now's the time to contact people.
Let them know how you feel. Say, here's how I feel about this issue, and warn them about the extra background that could be something coming back to bite us. James, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
Thank you.
And folks, thank you for joining as well. Also want to say thank you to all the stations that provide airtime for Crosstalk. If you enjoy Crosstalk, call your station managers. Let them know that you appreciate it because they provide the airtime for us to be here every day. And we recognize that Crosstalk is a public service program designed to deal with community needs that we need to be addressing. Have a blessed day, and thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.